Human resource security can cover anything that relating to people working or potentially working for an organization. So this will, relate to job descriptions, job recruitment. We have to know something about the employees, any personnel screening. We've got to be able to communicate expectations to employees in agreements. We need to be able to have reporting on incidents. We need to provide security education, training, and awareness to employees. And so it's a big area. And you have employees. They can be very unpredictable oftentimes, but you need them for the organization, of course. And so it falls in not only security, but they have rights as employees, and those have to be respected as well. When you think about employees within an organization, they go through a certain life cycle, and each of those stages of the employee life cycle can have security implications. So everything from recruitment to onboarding, to user provisioning, orientation, career development, and ultimately termination. And you think, well, how is it the case that recruitment is a security concern? Well, when you advertise for a particular position, you may want a person with certain skills. It will communicate the potential that somebody else has left the organization, or what security protocols are currently in place, and hackers can use that information to exploit a potential vulnerability. When you're onboarding, you will need to follow the procedures relating to access control to make sure that the person has the required level of access. During orientation, you will provide the individual with the resources and devices, assets they will need to perform their job function. And then as part of their career development, they may move to a different position within the organization, have different varying levels of access as a result. And then ultimately, we'll learn about what happens when you terminate an employee. How do you deal with ensuring that information is not stolen or lost in that process? And so we need to know, have a policy in place to ensure that the termination of an employee, either it's through the job ending or through formal termination procedure, that it is followed correctly. And it's a very emotionally charged event in many cases, of course, because employment is central to people's livelihood, and so it has to be dealt with some compassion and understanding. But the policies have to also reflect this as well.
So in this week's lecture, we'll be discussing human resources security. Human resource security comprises of a number of different things. This can include job descriptions, job recruitment. You have to know something about your employees, personnel screening. You have to be able to communicate expectations to employees, as well as agreements with employees. You will have to have a structure for reporting incidents. And as part of your work, you'll most likely be involved at some point in information security, education, training, and awareness. These are critical roles within any company, as we'll see, because human beings create a lot of problems for security, and they have to be trained. They have to be trained on, how to make use of the resources of the company, the IT resources, and we have to have a mechanism in place on what to do if those agreements are violated. That can be a problem as well. When you think about IT security in relation to human resources, you can think about it in terms of a life cycle. So, the IT security problem, you might say, in relation to human resources starts right at recruitment. So, what information is being shared about the company online? What attracts? What information is being used to attract potential employees? Once you have employees, they've signed their employment agreement. There is a period of onboarding. We'll have to figure out what access they'll need to have. There is user provisioning, what resources, assets they will need, either IT assets, such as a laptop, for example. There will be a period of orientation that you'll need to engage with. In companies, the many employees may change positions within the company. Their user provisioning will also change as a result of that. And ultimately, the career or the job will come to an end, either by a formal termination or the contract simply ending. And so we have to have a process in place for terminating access of for the employee. So personnel security policies are going to be necessary because personnel can be a key point of weakness within any organization. Right? In many cases, humans are the weakest link, right? You can have the best encryption, you can have the best technology. If the passwords are written down or communicated, or there are phishing attacks and that kind of thing, what can happen is your IT efforts go down the drain. So we have to be careful about thinking through how employees will make use of the IT resources and how the policies will be communicated and ultimately enforced. So many personnel securities are designed for preventing social engineering attacks. So these are, attacks where somebody asks for your password or asks bits of information from you in order to, or you're sharing passwords or you're allowing access cards to be shared and that kind of thing. These security policies will communicate the expectations to the employees, what they are not allowed to do, for example. And then you can control information at various points in the hiring process. So you want to make sure that you've done background checks, for example, that you have made the individual aware, they've signed confidentiality agreements, for example, acceptable use agreements, let's say, and they are understood. Many times, what can happen is the employee just signs that agreement and doesn't really pay attention. So, a big job is trying to figure out, can the employee has the employee meaningfully consented? Now you can imagine, when you just start a job, you're motivated to cooperate. You can sign something, not really read it, not really understand it, and then it will be the employer's fault if they have failed to communicate the policy appropriately to that individual. Because remember, there is an inequality of bargaining power between the employer and the employee. And so that has to be taken into account when we think about this particular policy domain. So your job recruitment and description policy gives people an idea of what the job will entail. Right? You can have quite a lot of information about that job and what they're expected to do. And you need to have that. You need to have some information about what the job involves. However, if you communicate too much information, or the person can know or infer if there are weaknesses in your security because there are individuals that are no longer with the company, which means that certain systems may be vulnerable to attack. You've got to be very careful about the information that you're sharing during this phase. So a job posting can contain lots of information about changes in personnel, about product development, about new services, the opening of offices. It will give you the name and phone number of the hiring manager. And if you're familiar with the company, you're familiar with an industry, this is a wealth of information, and you can use it as part of your corporate espionage. So, it can be used as a pathway for social engineering attacks, because you can contact the hiring manager and get more information about the company through them. So a recommended approach is to have two versions. You would have a version A that's intended to attract the attention and interest of employees, and then a version B which is more detailed and then posted internally, where candidates who make the first cut then find out more about the mission of the organization, the position in general terms, and the responsibilities of that position. Of course, remember, this person has to decide whether or not he or she is capable of doing the work, and therefore the posting is going to be necessary in sufficient detail for them to make that decision. The version B will also state the organization's expectations regarding confidentiality, safety and security, and the importance of security that all employees are to honor. Now, neither of these versions should contain information about specific systems, software, security features, any access controls, all of that stuff, you don't want to share with prospective employees at this stage. There's no agreement, there's no contract in place yet. Then you have, you will, after this process has gone through, there's going to be a process of interviewing, and during the interview, it can be very easy to disclose sensitive information. So you've got to be careful regarding mentioning new products. People can be very excited about the new products the company's offering, and anything that they have under development. So you want to also make sure that individuals, if they're coming for an interview, are given a visitor badge, let's say. They are not given access to secure areas. They are given a facility tour, which is specified in advance. And these things will help prevent social engineering attacks or the sharing of confidential information. You would have also a screening policy, and then you need to think about what types of things you would have in this policy. So I'll give you an example from the textbook. It's in page 164. Have a look at that and think about why you would need a policy on personnel screening, right? And the types of things you're going to have there. Now, some negligent or malicious users may not simply follow the policy. There has to be sort of an account for that, right? So even if the policy legally covers the organization, it doesn't really matter, because the consequences of a leak from a malicious employee can be very devastating. It can result in the loss of intellectual property, loss of revenue, embarrassment for the people involved if they brought them into the company and then they have shared information inappropriately. So in these cases, the policies alone won't protect their organization. Right? It's the successful application does. So you've got to make sure that you're applying the policy. And remember, policies are just pieces of paper with words on them. But what matters is how they are implemented and applied. So the twist in this for this particular policy is it's the organization's personnel who are going to apply these policies. Either they're going to do that in a successful, appropriate way, they're going to follow the policies, or they may not. But they definitely will not if the policies are not clear and understandable. So that's where our role comes in. Background checks are necessary for organizations to proactively protect themselves. So, for professors, they have to do background checks regarding their education. If you would work for the government, you may need a clearance. You may have inquiries regarding your loyalty, your character, your trustworthiness, your solvency in the case of a director, and your reliability. So all of these things go into background checks. So in a place like the university, educational backgrounds are confirming people have the right credentials. That is going to be pretty key. You may want to call previous employers or ask for background employment references. You may want to authenticate licenses or certifications or credentials. In some cases, you want to do a credit history if they're in a financial position of control. In some positions, you want to do a criminal background check, and then you want to have that verified that there's been no undisclosed criminal history involved. Now, all of that seems pretty invasive, or is pretty invasive actually, right? So you've got to keep in mind that employees do have a right to privacy. You have to stick within the legal limits, and the information, and use the information when making employment decisions. You can't ask for everything. You've got to make sure it's relevant. Right? It's generally recommended to ask candidates to agree to a background check. If the candidate refuses to agree to something that's reasonable, then you can use that as a basis for not hiring. Let's consider termination. Now, it's very easy to think about these problems in the abstract, but getting fired, getting terminated is a very emotionally charged event because your livelihood is on the line, your reputation is on the line. You are going to be losing employment insurance potentially, or employment income, and then there is a deeply personal. It's deeply personal. Let's say. Now, you might think, well, do you treat somebody, that you have a friendly termination? That is to say that the contract simply comes to an end and the person the job is over, or do you treat that person the same way as an unfriendly termination? What happens when the person has been having bad performance reviews repeatedly, and they are looking for ways to get rid of that employee? Is that any different? How are you going to treat those differently? Is the policy going to treat those things differently? And I'm going to suggest that it's not. It's not going to be any different from an IT perspective as to whether or not the termination is friendly or unfriendly. You've got to be able to cut off access in both situations efficiently, and make sure in both cases that information is not lost. In many cases, friendly terminations can be more of a problem, right? Because the person knows when they're ending, they know they can gather information or they can take information out of the company over a longer period of time. And so they may they may present a greater risk to the organization. Once you've got hired, you're going to have an agreements policy, a personnel agreements policy in place. This means that the employees will agree to keep company secrets confidential. They will have acceptable use policies. How are you using, are you allowed to surf the web? Are you allowed to use company resources for personal use, for example? And all of these things will be specified there. And the reason that you're going to make people sign these agreements is that if they violate them, you can point to the agreement and say, look, we had every employee attest or sign this agreement, and you have breached that agreement. And it can be a basis of either discipline or ultimately termination from the company. Confidentiality agreements are contracts that we enter into by the employee and the organization. So parties will agree that certain types of information remain confidential. This can include data results, any prototypes, software, engineering drawings or specifications or tools or systems. All of these things are going to be subject to the confidentiality agreement and protect the company through this. So you can be sued for breach of confidentiality, and you can be enjoined, or you can have an injunction issued against you to prevent you from sharing that information further. So the confidentiality agreement protects against the disclosure of sensitive technical information. It can prevent the forfeiture of a patent award. If you disclose the information, you can forfeit your patent rights. Very serious if you've developed, if you spent a lot of money on R&D. So the confidentiality agreement will specify, what information can or cannot be disclosed, any handling procedures, if you are required to return any information, and what time frame. So we'll specify the processes for information when the employment is terminated. Information security affirmation agreements teach employees the importance of security. They obtain commitment and instill organizational values. Right? So the focus here is on explaining why the policy has been established and how it's important to comply. Right? So here is where you will think through how to motivate your employees, how to motivate the employees to comply with the policies. Not always easy, not always straightforward. IT security may not be their primary job function, but you have to impress upon them the importance of security to the mission of the organization. And so these affirmation agreements can be used as a teaching tool that provides guidance for when a user, what to do when a user is faced with a situation that's not covered, who to report to, for example. You can have a condensed version of the entire information security policy document specifically crafted for employees. So here's an example of a typical information security affirmation agreement. So the example clause is all of the work that we are doing at company X to secure the public's information will be ineffective if the most important aspect of information security, the daily users of our information resources, have weak passwords. Though we recognize that it's initially inconvenient, using a strong password is the most important way you can protect our information resources. We would like to think of passwords as a shared secret between you and companies' information resources. So it's a way of communicating, why it is important, what you're supposed to do, and what it means for the company. The components of an affirmation agreement can include such topics as the acceptable use of information resources. whether or not you can download it, whether or not you can take it home, internet and email use, incidental use of information resources, password management, laptop, portable computers, all of those things will, whether or not you are allowed to take computers, home, what you are able, whether or not you're able to, take a computer, any sign-out procedures, for example, will be listed, as part of the affirmation agreement. You generally want to conclude with something, relatively positive, and saying that the user has read the agreement, they understand the agreement, they understand the consequences of violation, and they agree to abide by the policies presented. You got to make sure the person really understands that clause. Then you've got to sign and date it and then file it. SETA stands for Security, Education, Training, and Awareness. Awareness is the reminders of appropriate behavior. Training is the involvement of teaching skills, providing knowledge, and education is what is involved with providing insight and understanding. All of these things are part and parcel of the ongoing effort of IT security professionals to train employees to make sure that they understand what they are doing. And it's an ongoing process because people either forget, or you get new employees, or you get employees that change their position. And it's not always easy because the threats change too, and they've got to be made aware of the threats. But at the same time, you've got to keep it within reasonable limits because remember, it may not be their primary job function. Think about why there are so many recommended policies in the area of human resources security. And so, human beings are, the resource of any company. And while they create a lot of solutions, they also create a lot of problems from an IT perspective, particularly. And this is why we need a lot of policies here because we've got to be able to let people know what is expected of them. They've got to be able to read the policy, they have to understand it. They may be adverse to it, and yet we've got to make sure that they've clearly understood it and that we are capable of enforcing it, particularly if it's dealing with sensitive information and they have access to that. So we'll end there, and if there are any questions, we'll take them up in class. Thanks very much.